And I told him this idea and he went, "It's a great idea." And I said, "But what if somebody sort of copies it and does something?" "It doesn't matter. You've got to be the best and you will be the best." So those words, I blame him today. I always say it was your fault. You were the catalyst. And from then, Reset was born.
Welcome back to the Believe in Yourself podcast. Today's guest started her journey using a blend of marketing and brand management skills to allow her to develop and execute successful growth-focused strategies for international companies in the health sector. She then moved into the fashion industry and was named one of the 25 most influential names in fashion in an article in the Times magazine entitled "The Power of People." She is the founder and CEO of Reset MSM, a luxury platform that provides customised solutions to address modern stress management. Please welcome to the Believe in Yourself podcast, Joy Yaffe.
Thank you.
Joy, thank you ever so much for joining me today. How are you keeping during these times?
I'm keeping so busy, Luke, which is a blessing. So I don't really have a great time except in the evenings because I'm actually on my own, single, living in my own apartment, a person who always thought they loved that. I do love my space, but not 24/7. So I'm missing a lot of connectivity. We're very, very blessed to be digitally connected, so we can even do this amazing podcast. Very excited to be one of your chosen people, and I've really enjoyed listening to the podcast.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for the very kind words, and the pleasure is all mine to have such an incredible individual who has devoted so much to giving and helping people get to where they want to be is a real pleasure of mine. But for me, I want to start this episode by talking about where you very first started starting your journey, understanding, peeling back the layers of understanding Joy as a young person and some of the experiences that you had as a youngster.
I'm the younger sister with two sisters. My mum wanted a really big family because she was a refugee, and somehow because of miscarriages and things that didn't happen. So my big sister is really my big sister. So she's the one who I looked up to, who I felt knew everything, and always appeared confident, tall and grown up because she was quite a bit older than me. And on my flight into maturity, I really found my own voice, not until I was probably about 15, 16, when she decided to get married and she left home. And I think that's when I really started to develop as a person. I was a very shy child, I think probably because my sister is quite ebullient, and you know the ebullient Joy of now, but if there's two of us in a room, I will sort of be, and she's really larger than life in many ways. So I admire my sister, we're very, very good friends, and she was sort of my hero growing up.
And why is it important for especially young people to have a hero in their lives during their early stages?
I think it's good to have someone you aspire to be like. I think I wanted her confidence. I never got her height. And I think she was always she was very proud because I was sort of a literally living doll that she could carry with her. So she loved taking me, even when she had boyfriends, she used to take me along. So I'd go to the cinema and things. And I think it probably, at the time, it seemed that she was, I was looking up to her, but I suppose I must have picked up traits from her that I've emulated. All the good traits. I left all the other ones behind.
Did you learn any vital lessons through that time and through that process of learning?
Because actually the person who I did emulate and admire and who was my real role model in life in my initial years was definitely my mum. She was everything to me, and definitely my best friend. When I went to college, one of the lecturers at college also took a great interest in me and became not only an amazing mentor to me, but a great family friend to my parents. And in fact, when my mother was very, very ill, I was already a grown-up. She turned to her and asked her to sort of look after me.
And if you're okay talking about it, what happened with your mother and her illness?
My mother developed lung cancer. She wasn't a smoker. I think they say that lung cancer is very much connected to inner grief. My mother came to England on the last Kindertransport in 1939, and she was a feel-good person. No one would ever have thought there was anything buried so deeply. And I only regret, and perhaps my future and the career that I've gone into now, probably the fact that if my mother had been able to speak about her inner grief, because when we'd tried all alternative therapies, because basically traditional medicine told us there was no hope. And I think I'm not a quitter, and that wasn't acceptable. So we had an amazing journey. My mother, as she was when she was well, was left us gently, even in the year that she was ill. So we had almost a year from the diagnosis to spend a very, very special year with my mum, and to take the philosophy and also the actual diet of macrobiotics, to apply that to life. And we had a very, very special year. And I think this also inspired me for the future. I went all over to find people who could help my mum. She went to a healer who's an amazing man, who actually, when my sister developed breast cancer, she also went to him, and my sister is thriving many years later, and he's also become a family friend. And it was actually an amazing year, because we could demonstrate to mum how much we cared, how much we loved her. Although we were absolutely forbidden by her, she told us no mushy. She didn't want anyone to get sad, anyone to get sentimental. We just had to make the most of our time together.
I can really understand that during those times, we tend to, whenever we see family members in pain or suffering, we always tend to do as much as we can to physically help them, like you've demonstrated there in your story. How did that have an impact on your personal life, or maybe you pursuing your career?
I was very fortunate at that time. I was working for a big corporation in the health industry. Fortunately, when mum was diagnosed, I had hit my targets for the year already. I always put 10,000% in everything I do. I think you may know. And they were absolutely supportive throughout the process. I moved to be with my mum. I didn't want her to think she was dying, so I would then go back. She was in a different country, and went backwards and forwards the whole time. And I even brought her to Milan during that time to meet, and we went down to Perugia, where Michio Kushi, who is no longer also with us in this life, and he was one of the main gurus of macrobiotics, and we went to meet Michio, and we did a lot of very special things together. So it impacted me that I am still macrobiotic, and that was well before Madonna talked about being macrobiotic. And I think that made a huge change to my life, about the whole ethos of when you do anything in life, including cooking, you should do it with a good heart and with positive energy. I think that was really a key beginning of learning mindfulness, positive energy, healing, and seeing that there were many, many different routes to feeling better and the positivity. And my mum used to do meditation takes at that time as well.
And I think that's something that not many people know a huge amount is microbiotics. And I'd love to hear about maybe some of the lessons that you learned. You talked there about meditation, mindfulness, positive energy, and doing things with a joyful heart, which I love. I think is a brilliant philosophy. What lessons did you learn, and what can you share about some of the learnings that you had?
Well, what I love most about macrobiotics is that it is all about balance. And that's what most people don't have in their lives. So macrobiotics is when people always think it's a diet and you're going on a diet. It isn't. It's a balance of yin and yang and foods that are extreme. So, for example, yang food would be meat, which is something that can make us quite aggressive. And something very yin would be sweets and sugar and wines and alcohol. So all of those things are okay, but in very, very reserved amounts. And in the middle, there's a huge clock of things that you can eat. And macrobiotics, macro means big, and it means the big picture of food. So it means having lots of different leafy green vegetables, root vegetables, round vegetables, and leafy greens, and lots of colourful plates of food, using sea algae as calcium, no dairy products, I have a little bit of fish. You're allowed to have a little bit of fish in your diet. They prefer you to eat white, small, lazy fish. And it's a legacy that my mum left for me, and I've continued to be macrobiotic since she passed away, which, as you know, is many years ago. And to me, it's just an inspiration, because it does change who you are. It really does, because we are what we think and we are what we eat.
Amazing. I love that. You are what you eat and you are what you think. Yeah. And coming back to dealing with grief, because I think it's something that we all go through during some part in our life where we lose a loved one. And what's your advice and what did you do practically to help you deal with that?
I think that you really can't advise. I think everybody relates to grief in a very, very different way. I had very good friends in Milan at the time who knew my parents and who played bridge with them. And Roy was a doctor and said, if you feel like talking to me at any time, Joy, about the grief. And I thought, I don't need to speak to anyone, and I'm fine. And I was very lucky. I've always had a very strong work ethos. But actually, part of the whole process was deciding to change career paths, which I didn't in the end. I decided I was going to work in some way helping people with cancer. And it was the most weird time, because my mother passed away in April of 1993. And of course, there was nothing digital at that time at all. And yet people contacted me from everywhere saying, you know so much about cancer, because by word of mouth, people had, and I would say, well, actually not. I just lost my mum to lung cancer, but I can recommend this book, and I can tell you the books that I recommended that I would still recommend to people. There's a wonderful book called Love, Medicine and Miracles by a man called Bernie Siegel, who was an oncologist. That helped me greatly. I recommended a lot of the macrobiotic cookbooks, especially the self-healing cookbook. And the irony of the whole story is I actually gave in notice on the job I was doing, but I've always been committed and always correct. And I gave them 6 months notice. Said, don't worry, I'll find a replacement for me. And in that interim time, within, I think about a month after I lost my mum, I got a call from an ex-colleague, and he said to me, I'm sorry, Joe, I just only heard about your mum recently. How's everything? How's work? So I said, well, actually, Carrie, no one knows, but actually I've given him my notice, but you can't tell anyone because no one in the industry knows. And he said to me, what are you going to do? I I said, well, I intend to do something with all the things I've learned about cancer and help people. He said, no, you're not going to do that. You're coming to work with me. And I said, as a joke, make me an offer I can't refuse. And he did. So that, strangely enough, took me into another part of the health sphere, which was infection control, which is quite relevant, of course, now. And I'm very happy to say that I was one of the first people who sort of reacted and pulled my whole team out of our startup space, because I knew this was quite a serious deal, COVID-19. So I didn't make a huge change then. I did 4 years later, when again, serendipitously, I was at living in Milan and loving fashion. I was involved in, I knew a lot of people in the industry, and I've sort of always been someone who loves clothes. And I happened to meet someone at after the Versace fashion show, had no idea who they were. The next day my phone rang, and it was the wife of the couple who I'd been sitting opposite. And she basically said, my husband has got business and blah, 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 and he'd love to talk to you. And I thought, that's bizarre. And I said, well, actually, I'm traveling tomorrow. I'm off to such a, where's your husband's business? And she said, so I said, oh, that's fine. That's only round the corner to where I live. So perhaps I can meet him when I come back. And when I met him, all I did was recommend people that I knew who were actually working in fashion, and I knew were either looking for things or wanted a job in fashion. And that was a long conversation that lasted for about 3 months. Because it had always been a passion and a hobby, but I hadn't visualized it as a career path at all.
And so what made you turn that passion, that hobby of fashion and clothing and design and all those things that you like to do or you had a passion for, what initially made you take that risk and jump into switching industries from health into fashion?
I think Giacomo Corsi, who is no longer with us, unfortunately, his persistence and interest and sort of trying to whet my appetite. And after, I can't remember how, I think I probably saw him almost every other week for 3 months. It was only down the corner, so we'd have a coffee, and then maybe, I don't think we ever went beyond the coffee in the office at that time. It's very, very correct, very formal. And one day I said to him, listen, Giacomo, I think the next step, if there will be one, because I told him I was earning a lot of money, I didn't think he could replicate that, and he said, I will. And it sort of went on like that. And I said, I'd really like, they made their own product. It was basically leather, and they used to make all the leather pieces that Gianni Versace, they produced for Versace, for Prada, for all these people who didn't have their own production at that time. I said, I'd love to see your factory. And he said, I'm so happy you've said that, because I really want you to see the factory. I took a very early train down to Florence, and it was in this tiny little place called Calcinaia, which is somewhere about an hour from Florence. He came to pick me up personally, which I found really endearing, because he was a very very important guy in fashion, and he came to the station to meet me personally. He didn't send anyone. I found that really very, very touching in a way. And the factory just blew me away. It was all artisans. I walked in a room, first of all, Giacomo, at which I did know, it was absolutely manic about everything being clean and in its place and beautiful. And these were artisans. There's one lady ironing leather. I've never seen anyone ironing leather in my life. There was another lady there doing hand sewing on top of leather. And everybody was happy. It was a lovely ambience. It was the ideal idea of a working environment for artisans. And you could feel his passion for his product and what he did. And the nicest thing the thing probably that actually was the catalyst to me saying yes was he had his own private dining room, but it was the same food that all his staff ate in a staff you could call it canteen, but it wasn't that sort of atmosphere. It was the most wonderful homemade cooking, just wonderful. So all the staff ate this amazing food. He ate the same food as the staff. And there was this great atmosphere, and people were so proud and happy to work for him. And I thought, this is great. I love it here. And I said, and he brought out the contract. He had it there. I think he knew. He was so pleased I was going down to see it, because I think he knew it would be the cincher. I have to say, I was a little bit shocked when I went in his office, because his clean sort of streak, there wasn't one piece of paper on his desk. You can't see the table that's surrounding me working from home at the moment, Luke, fortunately. But I'm a paper pusher, and I've got all sorts of things. So actually, Giacomo was at that time a great influence on me that I had to keep when I worked in. I made sure I had plenty of drawers so I could put everything neatly away before he came in my office, and always have a clean desk.
That's fantastic to hear about how something so little, for example, like Giacomo personally picking you up from the station, and the culture that he probably instilled along with his staff in that organization, in the factory, the impact that had on you is incredible, because it's the small things that many of us will often forget. And especially with Giacomo being such a fantastic leader in his industry, it's a case of that so many top leaders forget to do the small things. And it's often them small things will make the best culture for people to work in. And I'm so pleased to hear that that was probably one of the main reasons why you bought in the industry, because of the way that the small things that he did and the way that that organization and that factory made you feel.
I really think it's, my mother always taught us that it was the little things that make the difference. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think also the connectivity I felt with how he ran his business, how he actually had the wherewithal to pick. He was gung-ho on picking me. He obviously recognized a workhorse in the making, because he didn't have papers on his desk, because he was great at choosing the right people and delegating.
And I think it's one of the things that I've taken from a recent episode of the podcast was that you always hire people for who they are. And because that you can always teach somebody the skills to make a great person inside the job, but what you can't teach is that passion. And I think that when you find someone like Giacomo found in you, I think that he did the right thing by making sure that you got that contract side and made you switch. But talking about making that transition, what hurdles did you personally face during those times, and was there anything that you used to how you overcame them?
Well, I'd been so blunt and honest with him the whole time when we were chatting, saying, I love fashion, and I've got friends who work in the fashion world, especially living in Milan. But I really, I didn't know any of the key players. I think one of the, probably what could have been a hurdle wasn't for me, because when I worked for corporate America, and I used to give lectures at universities around the world in other languages, in Italian. I'm not sure if they ever understood me, but I think they found it very endearing, my sort of anglicized Italian at that time. It was before I lived in Italy that I did that. And I think because of that, at such a young age, going into universities and speaking to large groups of people, it inspired confidence in me to not have any fear, because these were academics, to phone up someone at Harrods. And the company that I worked for was called Rufo, and we were launching a brand called Rufo Research, using young designers and talents. So I can remember this vividly. My name is Joy Yaffe. Who? I'm calling from Rufo. What? Well, you'll have heard of Antonio Berardi, who's our new designer. Who? And that was the first conversation, I guarantee you. But because you know me, and I think anyone who's listening to this will laugh, there were many articles written about me in fashion, and one of the words that came up was indomitable. So I never give up, and I I assure you that Harrods did come to our first show. So did Susie Menkes from the Herald Tribune. And I think one thing that I've learned from my parents and I've learned from life is that people are so important in your life, so instrumental. And I've always believed that business is people. Even in this digital age.
No, I completely agree. Business is people, because without the people, it doesn't make the business as it is. And one thing I'd like to talk about is that was your first role in the fashion industry. So how do you go from being in that very first role to being one of the 25 most influential people in the Times magazine? How did that journey begin?
Well, basically, Giacomo had started the idea of Rufo Research for late Franco Sozzani, who was the editor of Italian Vogue. What I found out was that, in fact, there wasn't really a strategy behind the journey at all. It was sort of a one-off. They hadn't really put very much thought into it. How many young designers they were going to work with, how many shows these people were going to give, and many other things. But if you really want to know, probably, how did I become one of the fashion? Okay, so the first season, actually, the hurdles, I've just thought of one of the biggest hurdles. The first season, actually, Antonio Berardi had a very, very silly Italian agent who felt we were capitalizing on his name and he wasn't gaining anything from Rufo Research. So the first season, Antonio designed the most wonderful pieces. And then Giacomo got a letter saying that Soleciti, this agent, was pulling Antonio from, this was before we'd even had a show. But instead of ruining everything, so we gave basically the designer carte blanche to do the catwalk show as he wanted. So Antonio had gone to all intents and purposes. By the way, to secret all that, I'd like you to know that I'm very good friends with Antonio Berardi years later, because we did absolutely nothing. It was just this guy who just didn't understand anything. And in actual fact, I went to London, somehow located the guy who had done all the creative sets for Alexander McQueen, a wonderful guy called Simon, and got a great production company. And there was a lot of press about this, and it was very funny because the Evening Standard even had a headline, "A lot of lather over leather." But of course, as they say in life, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So it really put the spotlight on us, and we did a show without the designer, which was, it's unheard of, and it was a huge success. And we sold very, very well both our collections, because Rufo Research was the more cutting edge, and then we actually sold Rufo, which was more classic chic. And we had a very, very successful season. And going on from that, I recognized another great talent, a journalist who'd done a big feature on Rufo called Heidi Finley Levin. Heidi became a great friend of mine, and she's one of them. You wouldn't really know, I'm sitting here, you can see, your podcast people can't, but anyone who knows me, I'm pretty low-key in the way I dress. And Heidi just looks like a fashionista through and through. You can see as soon as she walks through the door. And Heidi had a gift for looking for new talent. So I spotted her. I asked Giacomo if I could recruit her to do that. She would find a few different people, and then I would choose the person. And I've always had an eye for fashion. Even friends of mine who had worked in fashion in Milan were all, because I was traveling when I worked for corporate America all over the world, would say, "Where did you buy that? And who's that? And who's?" I think because my mother was European and had a great flair as well, and also grew up in a family in England, so we just go and knit. To make something from nothing, just laugh how it's tied from around your neck can make something into a new outfit. I just became recognized. I had no idea the article, The Power of People, was ever going to be published until I got a phone call from Time magazine, and I was actually going away that day on holiday, and they said the next day on holiday, they said, "Have you got a photograph?" Again, no emails and things to give to anybody. You had to find a physical photo and send it. And I said, "I'm going to have to go home and get a photograph, and then the girls will send it to you." And I had no idea about the article. Quite shocked. It's Lauren, who wrote the article, someone, a journalist I'm still friendly with to this day. She didn't tell me about it at all, and it was a great honour. The article was really about people in the front of fashion, like Anna Wintour and Tom Ford, who were on the same page as me, but also people behind the scenes, and I was one of those. So there was me, and there was one of the people who work for LVMH, the people who get the things done behind the scenes, and also for my eye for choosing people who wanted to do meteoric careers. But of course, at that time, Lauren couldn't have known that.
Oh, that's incredible, and it's so amazing to hear that in that article it was a recognition of, like I said, both people on the front line, those names, but also the people who are behind and who are the real power behind the brands, because people like yourself who has really, in my opinion, infectious energy and adds tremendous value to wherever you're working. It's so important that we recognize those people, because sometimes it's those people that go unrecognized and go unnoticed because they're not leading from the front. However, they're the people who are driving the brands. And talking about your ability to headhunt talent potentially, or to look at people doing brilliant work, what was one of the things that you looked at when it looked to recruiting?
They had the certain je ne sais quoi. I can't. It's something that you just isn't. You can't pinpoint. Just a creative talent that was just very, very special. And also there was something not only very special about what they produced, but something special about the designers. I became friends in inverted commas with a lot of them, best friends with some of them. Sadly, one of them, Sophia Kokosalaki, who was a Greek designer based in London, became a great friend of mine, and she passed away last year very prematurely. That was a real tragedy and something I'm still coming to terms with. And we had so much fun. She had the most amazing, infectious laugh, a lovely laugh. And we just had a lot of fun together. But it was gratifying. I loved it, and it was great to see that someone called Raf Simons. It took even, you may not have heard of him, you may have. He made front page news when he became the design director of Dior. He then went to Calvin Klein, and finally, Miuccia Prada has taken him for Prada, and I think that's where he should have. I'm amazed that it took from. I think we did that show with Raf and Veronique in 1999, all this time to 2020 for her to recognize Raf, because he was the perfect fit. I could have told her there and then. There's something, I think I listen as well, not only looking at the designs and feeling the person, but it's that intuitive voice that a lot of people ignore that actually tells you this is it. There's a gut feeling that says, wow, this. And I didn't care whether people found Rufo Research amazing. We never announced the designers until very near to the show to make it all very exciting. And people used to try to take me out to dinner and ply me with sake, which is one of my weaknesses. I like hot sake, and it still wouldn't. And come on, Joy, who's the next designer going to be? Many times we didn't know, because the talent is not everywhere. You've really got to seek out talent, and you find it sometimes in unusual places, in unusual people.
I love that. I love that. It's that consistency to look, isn't it? And there's the opportunity to look maybe sometimes beyond the person and beyond what's presented, or maybe traditionally known as a CV that many people are used to applying with it. And it's looking beyond that. And I think you can find so much, and you can learn about people when you take the time out to find out who they are, rather than just perhaps what they can offer. But what was kind of one of the biggest learnings that you took from working in the fashion industry?
Certainly working in a team, because I previously worked with people perhaps that I would, when I was went up the ladder, who I gave territories to, but they were responsible for their territories. In the fashion industry, you really need a team, and it really teaches you to be a team player. I can remember, and also the fashion industry, my God, I thought I was a hard worker before. It's the hardest industry out there. During seasons, you work 24/7. If you were doing my role, which is an unusual role because Rufo wasn't a company like LVMH where there are so many different vice presidents and whatever. So I was umbrellaing everything from sales, marketing, PR, finding designers, watching production, putting input into collections, the whole 9 yards. And I have never worked such long hours in my life. I'd get up sometimes 5, 6 in the morning in season. Sometimes clients wanted to come in 8 o'clock in the morning. Then you might have breakfast meetings. You'd have about 12 meetings with clients, press coming in as well all day. And then you'd manage perhaps to just go home, wash your hands, put a little bit of lipstick on and go out for a late dinner. And this just went on all season. It's really tough. And you're right in the front line there. So my team were really instrumental in all the girls who were amazing, I can tell you the names, their backgrounds and the relationships. And what I loved was giving people roles that maybe they would never have thought they would have. I never stick to the book, Luke, ever. So my head of commercial was a great girl, and I couldn't find the right person to replace her. And she came in and she said, listen, I've got a great friend. She's a banker. She's actually from South Africa. She speaks 5 languages. She had a banking role in Milan. She's getting married. And then the bank where she signed a contract found out who she was getting married to, and they tore up her contract in front of her. They called her in for a meeting and said, we don't believe in pillow talk. He works for a competitive bank, and forget it. She said she's so appalled by the way they behaved and how the lack of integrity and trust in her, and she loves fashion. She's quite prepared to come in, work for free if you'll give her a chance. I met her. What a bright, wonderful person. I'm still in touch with Natasha. Natasha Sakota is the single name. I think she's got 4 kids now and lives in Lugano with Carlo. And she just loved it. I realized I could not build what Giacomo wanted to build, distribution worldwide, with me. I couldn't go everywhere. And so I sent Natasha, they used to make books at this time. There's no digital photography or anything. Books with photographs, going to visit stores right through the whole of Russia. And she went to Japan. They're all the places. She went to a few times, showing me all the areas as if I'd been there and finding the right clients for us. I've concentrated on our core business, which was the UK and the USA. And then I developed other countries and sent. So I gave everybody else the opportunity to travel, to enjoy. And Natasha was head of commercial, which meant she had to put, after the fashion shows, we had to integrate all the fashion show pieces into the showroom, and that meant later night doing that. And she came to me and she said, we always had also an international press dinner the night of our fashion show. No mean feat. And she said, Joy, could I possibly, I'd love, and I used to put all my little girls on tables depending on the languages they spoke, because that's what the most satisfaction I've had in any career path is giving other people opportunity and seeing them grow. It gives me an enormous kick.
Of course. And talking about having left the fashion industry, I'd love to talk now about what you're currently doing. What are your plans, your current business, and how do you get started?
But I started to see that there was a lot of things in life that a lot of people needed to learn, including myself. The idea germinated in my head that we all needed to reset. It's a word actually being used so much now during COVID-19. And this was in 2006 that I decided, instead of continuing in fashion, which has changed dramatically. I think for the better. It's become democratic. You can go anywhere in a pair of sneakers, one of your cool believe in yourself t-shirts. It's all in. Everything's acceptable today, which is great. You can be yourself, and that's what's so important. And fashion today, there are no rules as there were in the 30s, the 40s, or the 50s. Men wearing hats, women going to sort of into the main town wearing gloves and hats. That's all gone out of the window. It was beautiful. They looked incredible. A lot of period dramas are incredible, but it doesn't fit with the lifestyle we're all living now in the 21st century. And I think there's no one today during this this period of time who isn't dressed in really comfortable attire. Let's put it that way. We're all sitting here probably in leggings and sportswear and joggers and all that sort of stuff. So I decided I wanted to create something that would help people. And why couldn't I and why shouldn't I? Because I've always built brands. I spoke to one of my best friends and one of the people who's closest to me in the world, and I called him up and told him the idea, and he's fairly blunt about things, and I thought, oh, God knows what he's going to say about this idea. He's had a very interesting career, from publishing ancient manuscripts to basically also being in the world of advertising and winning awards at the Cannes Festival for advertising. And I told him this idea, and he went, "It's a great idea." And I said, "But what if somebody sort of copies it and does something?" It doesn't matter. You've got to be the best, and you will be the best. So those words, I blame him today. I always say it was your fault. You were the catalyst. And from then, Reset was born. And I realized I didn't. Probably I carried on consulting in fashion for another year, but I realized Reset was never going to happen if I didn't fully commit. It's probably like everything in life. People wonder why relationships don't work. People wonder why the cake didn't taste good or the food didn't taste good. If you don't put 100% minimum into something, it's never going to taste right, and it's never going to happen. I had to accept on the journey of Reset that it's good enough, because sometimes in life, especially in the fashion industry, you're trying to be really the best and you've got to sell a lot of the product. And with Reset, I realized that I had a limited amount of money. I've self-financed so far. And basically it's a platform, as you well know, Luke, because I met you on this journey. And I moved back to the UK after living most of my life in Mediterranean climates, so it was a big decision to make, but the right decision to make. I met you on a really well, I didn't meet you properly, but very briefly that day. I came up to you, I believe, on a really pivotal day for Reset. We just moved to London, myself and the person who was working with me on the project, who couldn't get a visa to stay ultimately in England, which is sad, but her story is great because she's got an amazing position back in India with Techstars, so she's doing well, and she's with her boyfriend from before and very happy. So we're all very happy for Shipra. But here's a chance to go live and say thank you, Shipra, for all the help. I'll never forget all the people who have been on this journey and for different reasons have not been able to continue it. On the day I met you, Luke, as you know, it was a big wellness event. And that day, because they wouldn't let you in the hall before the program started, even though I'm doing a session, I thought, Joy, my goodness, you can at least treat yourself to a cup of tea. So I stood, this is what I hate about England, in the queue, this very long line that went forever at the event, and stood and stood, so that by the time I got to pay for and order the tea, I thought, oh, to hell with this, I'm going to go mad. I'm going to have a piece of brown toast. You can see that I'm quite frugal when I'm being mad with money for myself. So I ordered the toast and the tea, and I turned round and I said to the lady who was behind me, would you mind passing me the honey? She started a conversation, and that lady turned out to be Sarah Moore Williams, who's the actual dean of the business school at LSBU, and that is how Reset got a startup space at LSBU Business School and to be part of their entrepreneur in residence program. And you became my first UK guru because I heard you present. I thought you were amazing. I'd already got gurus on abroad, people I knew already, John Aronoff from the States, Peter Ishkans from the States, but I hadn't really developed a guru, such a big guru network and other people. And basically, you're one of the Reset gurus, and COVID-19, as you will know, has really accelerated the Reset sort of process. We had to get out there because we have to help people. I think, you know, I enjoy helping people. I don't think that that's necessarily altruism. I think it's quite ego-driven as well, because it makes us feel good when we help people. I don't understand other people who don't get that it makes you feel so much better when you actually can do something for somebody else. So Reset is on Instagram at Reset MSM, and my wonderful gurus, including you and many others, are recording content to help people at this moment in time when all of us, every single person I'm convinced, has got some feeling of uncertainty, fear, worry for the future, fear of contracting the illness when the lockdown is finished. What do we do? Well, today's video that's going to go up, and Harry Hewitson will tell you you should protect your immune system, which is very interesting, and there are basic ways. So we're really helping through giving pro bono content at this time, and also it's amazing. Unfortunately, you couldn't be with us because you had another event. We did our first Reset pilot event at LSBU Business School, thanks to the Dean, who gave us a wonderful space. And we had Hannah Rankin, the boxer. We had Toby Rowland Jones, the cricketer. We had Debbie Frank, the astrologer. It was an amazing evening. And I didn't know everyone was there. And unbeknownst to me, I'd invited one of my interns who'd worked for me. And when she talked a lot about her parents, and when I said to her and what her father had done, and she said I reminded her of her father. And when I asked her, well, what does your father do? She said, oh, I don't understand what he does anymore. And I didn't answer. She was still working for me. And she then asked me when I invited her to the event if she could bring her father. Unbeknownst to me, he worked for rather an important body and in the government, and he was blown away by the event. And through meeting him, he's an incredible human being. He's really interested. He's really responsible for the well-being of 500,000 people in the UK. And because of that connection, and because of his respect for the quality of the Reset Gurus and Reset, we are also in COVID-19 basket for all public sector workers. And I can tell you today, finally, which is very propitious to tell you, the beta version of the app is 99.9% there. So
amazing.
we're launching the beta version of our app. But I'm quite proud that I had the courage, and I said it is enough to go out there and to help people during this terribly difficult, unprecedented time.
And I think after hearing all about Reset MSM, I'm sure there'll be people who would love to find out more about it and ways they can get involved. So where can people find out about Reset MSM?
At Reset MSM on our Instagram account, a Reset Facebook account. So you can contact us on Facebook, you can contact us on Instagram. And also via my LinkedIn personal account or the Reset account, wherever you want to. You can find us.
Perfect. I'll make sure that if you do want the links to find out more about Reset or about Joy's wonderful story, I'll include those links in the show notes. So make sure you go ahead, check them out, connect with Reset MSM on whatever platform you best seem fit, and ensure that you take up this fantastic opportunity to take part in some of their pro bono work whilst you can. But before I conclude this interview, Joy, I just want to take some time to acknowledge the incredible person that you are, for the work that you have done across health, branding, marketing, fashion, and now in the self-improvement space is admirable. And for me, if there's one thing that I've taken from this episode, is the importance of giving people opportunities. And as you've clearly said, and you've said so many times throughout this episode, and it's really hit home to me, the opportunity that you need to stop chasing perfection and start chasing progress. And you just allow people the opportunity to make mistakes, to put them in that chance to learn, because unless you take a risk on someone and allow them the chance to learn, then they're never going to get better. And I think you've done that incredibly well yourself, but also having the experiences and stories that we have been so fortunate to have heard in today's episode, to have you actually take action and create something so proudly about Reset MSM. I really do think it's going to have a huge impact on people's lives. And on behalf of myself, everyone you've worked with across your many different industries, I would personally just like to say a massive thank you for being the incredible leader and role model that you are.
Well, thank you so much. I just see myself as Joy, a very, very lucky person to have had the parents I had, the blessing of meeting incredible people on my life journey, and to still be meeting even more incredible people today. So I thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a wonderful hour to spend with you, Luke, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
No, the pleasure's all mine. But before we finish up this episode, I finish all of my podcast series with a question called the Final Five. These are 5 rapid-fire, quick questions that, if possible, could be answered in a brief summary sentence. That would be much appreciated, but we may go a little over with some of them. So, first question number 1. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for my parents, my mentors, my friends, my family, and the wonderful opportunities that in my working career that led me to travel, paid for, all over the world.
And question number 2, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Remain true to yourself, never lose sight of the bigger picture, and always know that we're all on the same journey.
Wow, so powerful. We're all on the same journey. I love that. Question number 3, what's the most important lesson that you have learned?
Having the courage to have the courage of my convictions, and to actually listen and act when my little voice, my inner voice, talks to me.
Definitely. All about taking action and the courage that we have. And question number 4, what is the one thing that you wish you knew when you started out?
Never be convinced by what people think. Never let people judge you. Be your own person.
Brilliant. And finally, the 5th and last question, what does believing in yourself mean to you?
Actually, never being too busy, whatever I am doing, to help somebody in whatever way I can and in whatever way I need to do.
Thank you for listening to another incredible episode of the Believe in Yourself podcast. Please do make sure you leave a like, you subscribe down below, and check out our most recent episode right by here. Also, don't forget to leave a comment down below of what was your biggest takeaway from this incredible podcast.